It's part 11 of the Luxembourg campaign abridged, where previously we managed to damage the USA's territories in South America quite a bit. Then we started island hopping up towards the USA itself, conquering up the Caribbean into Florida, but then we were stopped and eventually pushed all the way back out of Florida, leaving us in a stalemate sort of situation. But we're going to instead focus on a few other bits and pieces that do remain unresolved outside of mainland USA, and one of those places is Central America. Here you can see I was trying to establish air superiority, but the airbase I was using here gets nuked and it appears that our crew all die, so we're sent back to no experience. The planes and the crew are still here, so I'm guessing they're like instantly replaced from your reserves. But with them now sucking due to being low level, I'm going to take them off the front line to train back in Europe. Inconvenient overall. We need to maintain some air superiority over all of the theatres we're putting our air bases in, so that doesn't happen. We can achieve that, but of course it wastes planes and makes actually attacking the enemy a little bit harder. As for the attack I'm making right here, it proved to be very easy. The USA control the Panama Canal. I just swarmed like 20 divisions in there with a naval invasion, and we get the good end of the weird reinforcement RNG thing. We actually don't fight the majority of the defenders, we're just able to land. The defenders retreat into nearby Panama, and now the canal itself is under our control, a very strategic location. I immediately wanted to build on it, but it's now technically controlled by Communist USA, and they're not going to be willing to let me build things there, and of course they're not going to build things there because the AI is useless. So we can't like put naval and air bases here to make our further moves easier. What we can do though is use this territory to get onto the other side of the Americas, which is handy because to attack those USA locations up the coast you have to attack from the west for some reason, so we start arranging that. In the meantime, I'm actually going to try and justify a war against Panama. This is the first time we're actually making an offensive move as Luxembourg. Panama aren't involved in the war, but I'm going to get them involved. I want to just come up with some fake reason to invade them, because controlling all of Panama would give us more control over this area in general and just help us move up towards the USA. So that will now be stewing away in the background. Long before it's ready, we've got some naval attacks to make even further up the coast, because there's a big block of territory in the Guatemala area controlled by the USA, and we're going to take it. First, I'm going to nuke a couple of their air bases. Well, I guess I'm also nuking their troops, but I'm specifically nuking the places where the air bases are, hoping to do the thing the enemy just did to me recently, to take out their local air force and just make it so that we can maintain air superiority nice and easy throughout our invasion. So there go the bombs. Annoyingly, part of their territory is in the next aerial region, so we have to do some annoying micro to maintain complete air superiority. Eventually, our invasion ships approach, and now we just light the entire place up, just going to nuke basically everything, to make sure that whatever was defending this region, half of them are now dead before we arrive. Also, by nuking them as the invasions are taking place, they do get an organization debuff as well that makes the invasion easier, and in this case we're going to have like 20 mechanized infantry divisions successfully land on the eastern coast. Once they're there, we're going to split them up and start driving in various directions to capture the various bits. Many of these bits are undefended. The most important one is the airbase and port in front of us. We drive on in there and defeat the already battered USA forces on the defense. And with that, we're going to split this group in half and be able to start doing the whole push the enemy into a corner thing. We've also got some 20 divisions of tanks landing nearby. That's going to help out as well. Their landing is pretty much uncontested. Now we just want to attack as soon as possible really, because we'll probably run out of supplies. We may have deployed too many divisions just on our own for the supply situation here. Didn't check obviously, but we just drive forwards with what we have, and we do manage to push the enemy into a pocket here at Guatemala City. Then we nuke that pocket, so now that's the enemy's strength halved again. And right after that, everything that's managed to set up nearby just runs in from multiple directions, beginning the process of division deletion as the low organization enemies are forced to die. Once we technically win the battle because of the reinforcement thing, everything else just dies as well. And that's going to be the end of this little area. We've created a new Guatemalan nation which is on our side in the war. this kind of weakens the USA, I guess, but not really. There are constant Comintern invasions of mainland USA going on, and Canada too. You can see they've got tons of troops in the sea all over the place just waiting to make loads of pointless attacks. And quite a few of these seemed to have promise, and sometimes I even sent my own troops to help. But I'm going to kind of skip over all this for this series, because the long story short is that all of them failed. There were constant attacks and attempts to invade the USA. Ground would always be taken and then very soon lost again, sometimes with like 100 divisions dying in the process. Extremely bloody attrition for the Comintern. The next thing that we do is this war with Panama once all the excuses are done being made. I thought this might be just me doing this war, so it will be separate to everything else, but in one way or another, the entire Comintern also ends up at war with Panama. And obviously that's an issue because you can see they've already started showing up here. There are going to be plenty of supply eaters on the way. Although I thought we don't really need to care about that because Panama don't have many troops. We can just throw 20 divisions at their single regions and take them. The battle at first looks very good, until it doesn't. It's one of these cases where the number and the colour doesn't necessarily correspond to what's going on, and a closer look reveals the enemy have 10 or 100 times our stats in these battles, for an assortment of reasons that require an assortment of tooltips to explain, but the long story short on that is that we failed to advance at all against Panama. I eventually took my mechanized infantry around to attack from the south because Colombia have conquered up to Panama's border. So I figured maybe another front would help, because that region is only defended by one division after all, and we just sat around gathering the planning bonus on other troops. However, my attacks in the south were similarly unsuccessful. Their one division could just hold off our 20 spammed mechanized infantry divisions, because of the various debuffs, I guess. Now I'm looking to air superiority. If we can't get through them, we can always nuke them. Unfortunately, the USA are contesting Central America very heavily, so it's a struggle to get aerial superiority. Luckily enough, our allies do help us push a bit, and eventually we push up in the south, taking one region. Doesn't necessarily help, since the enemy are now just going to concentrate more at Panama, but that will allow us to attack from two sides and increase the combat width, allowing our numbers to mean a bit more. I'm also planning some naval attacks, as you can see. Eventually we get indication that air superiority has been achieved because the Comintern starts nuking Panama. Well, I guess I was going to do that anyway, so that helps out, but you can also see the situation with supplies is very bad. It actually got so bad that I'm not even here anymore. I sent all my troops home because there was no food left. Now it's just the Comintern stacking their 200 divisions all over the place. But with the enemy now nuked, I thought this is our chance. I'll send troops in to try and help, and let's just nuke everything else while we still have air superiority. So we'll just level the enemy's formations in this area, get rid of any fortification they have and stuff like that, and then maybe we'll be able to push on through and finish this stuff off. As it happens, we don't really get involved very much in this fight, because it took a while to ship my guys back from the islands where they were staying. Once I arrived, the Comintern had followed up on my nuke attacks and taken most of the enemy's territory, so we participated very slightly on the ground there. In the end, we've won the war, but I guess it doesn't do anything because it doesn't help at all in the wider war. Now the Comintern just has slightly more territory and influence. After that, I went back to just micromanaging air superiority. We can maintain air superiority over the naval regions, and occasionally our planes will encounter enemy ships and attack them, and we did sink quite a few ships while I was doing this. I probably won't actually show it, but we sunk like 5 aircraft carriers. The USA had fleets wandering around here, and we damaged them quite a lot. Other than that, the other thing I was doing is starting to build a new army, because somewhere on the internet I read something to the effect that this division setup is the ultimate one. We have 13 units of special forces, 4 units of artillery, and a unit of heavy tanks. Altogether, you get a 40 width division that has some armor, and because of that thing I ranted about in a video before, the armor kind of transfers onto the special forces infantry as well and makes them a little bit bulletproof, which makes them better than regular divisions that AI is likely to field. We can't make very many because there's a cap on how many special forces units you can deploy, which I think is based on how many units you've deployed overall or something. So if I put my 2 million troops into the field just as spam divisions off in the corner, I could then put more special forces out, I think, anyway, but we'll see. So while we wait for them to be trained, we kind of just do nothing. We can watch the Comintern constantly die trying to invade USA. Here's a look at the war overall. It's still dead even. We have quadruple or triple their numbers, but we can't do anything with that. We are doing very well as Luxembourg. We're joint first for kills with 3.2 million kills against the USA for around 200,000 losses on our side. We've traded extremely well with them, but I'm pretty sure the other Comintern powers, in particular the USSR, are not trading very well at all. So for some reason, there's still everything to be played for here in this war. We can't really make much progress, but neither can they, to be fair. Here's what I ended up doing while sitting around. Yes, I've recruited like 100 infantry divisions at the same time. It's just 4 infantry battalions. I don't have enough army experience to make a new division type, but I was planning on making a regular infantry version of the super soldier divisions that I talked about earlier. So one with 13 inf, 4 artillery and 1 tanks. But with no army experience, we can't think of that yet. So in the meantime, I just made 100 divisions that have a bit of infantry in them, partially to increase our special forces cap. Now here's what I ended up doing next. It's cheating time. I got into console commands, and the reason is because I wanted to annex one of the Germanys. It took me a long time to work out how to do this, but eventually I got the result I was looking for. We now occupy the Socialist Soviet Republic of Germany or something. And this gives us access to the sea from our capital, which I mentioned before is one of the conditions you need to be able to make ships. So, with all of this territory occupied, we can now make a navy. I've already built tons of dockyards and naval bases along the coast in my previous attempts to be able to make a navy. Now we can actually use them. We can spam out submarines, and I'm just going to make absolutely loads of them and send them to surround the USA, because they do have hundreds of ships apparently in all of the naval regions around their coasts still. So I thought we might as well just sink everything to further our siege of the USA, so to speak. And I also started making some carriers and battleships and stuff just for fun. While all that's happening, there was a civil war in Greece with some stuttering nuclear attacks going on. I think what happened here is the USA probably staged a coup, but now they're stuck in the middle of the old world Comintern territory, so they're going to be attacked from every single direction, and suffice to say this rebellion will not last very long, especially with dozens of nukes being dropped on them. The AI got into its brainworms thing where it decides one spot needs to be nuked and it just keeps doing it, so they got blown away. Here are my submarines in action. We've got a group of 13 or so submarines, 15 submarines, out there, well, looking for trouble, I suppose. They're patrolling in an area that supposedly has a bunch of enemy ships in it, so I'm just sort of waiting to see if that does anything. It probably doesn't. Again, the naval side of warfare is like a whole new bucket of mechanics. I'm really back at square one with working out what's going on. Also, the user interface was trash, and I could barely organize just getting some ships together into a group and telling them to move somewhere. We are still, though, having great success at sea with our planes. As mentioned, we definitely sunk like 5 enemy aircraft carriers, and we kept also hitting battleships and cruisers, which for some reason were just chilling, moving about on their own in the sea. So it's all good. We even took out a whole bunch of convoys carrying USA infantry to somewhere. So we are whittling away at the enemy's resources by blowing up their ships, and presumably they lose some manpower as well as the crews drown. And now, the next thing to happen, the next stage in my master plan, is right here in Mexico. I staged a coup against Mexico and it was successful. My plan was to have this Mexican socialist state join the Comintern so that we could then move a land front line up to the USA. This was a really good idea, I thought, but it doesn't work in practice, because I think the world tension level is too low for new states to join the existing factions or something. So basically, while in the past I've been able to create new Comintern states in this method, with this method. Now I can't, and this war is completely separate to World War IV. It's just an internal civil war. My troops are actually there because I have military access with both sides in the war, but they can't do anything. I thought maybe having my troops there might prevent the loyalist forces from attacking the rebels, because they wouldn't be able to attack me due to me being a neutral power on the tile or something. Maybe there is a rule like that, I don't know, but this whole thing ends up being a disappointment, unfortunately. We're not going to be opening up a new front with the USA with this method. Another dream is crushed by Hearts of Iron 4. It's all going well. So we just go back to the siege. We're going to have to eventually do a successful naval invasion, and it's going to have to be us that does it. That's what's becoming clear. In the meantime, I did eventually discover that there's something useful we can make of this whole Mexican-Soviet Republic thing, and that is that I can now set troops on the USA border. While I'm not allowed to cross this border due to DAO rules, I can just be there, and that proves advantageous, as we'll see. There's another example of us taking out random enemy capital ships that are just wandering in the sea. Very useful because the enemy are wasting stuff rebuilding them, I presume. So what I ended up doing was putting a load of troops right here, and you can see the USA responded by putting a bunch of their troops on the border as well. So we are drawing enemy resources down to this border that technically neither side can use, and this can be used to our advantage, not only as a distraction, because now they're not somewhere else, so it slightly increases the chance of the random Cometerne attacks working, but while they're standing there, they're in a air region that's not being contested, so all I need to do is quickly send in one wing of planes, like in the morning. We'll have air superiority for a couple of hours before the enemy notice we're there, and then I can drop nukes using that air superiority. So there we go, there are no enemy planes in the southwest region, so we quickly nuke everything along the front line, killing at least 10 to 15 enemy divisions worth of troops there, all good stuff, and then enemy planes will show up to stop us, but we can just not attack anymore and go back to not contesting this aerial region. Extra cheeky strats right here. I guess we could just keep doing this and eventually kill all of the USA's manpower, but I think we'd run out of nukes before we do that, unfortunately. Still, a nice strategy. It has a knock-on effect actually, because the planes that go to the southwest theatre to kill me presumably temporarily leave the east coast a bit less air superiority for the USA, and there's a tiny window in which we're able to drop nukes, and it appears that Washington takes the brunt of that, like 6 nukes go off in that general area. So there we go, the USA's very capital has been leveled. That's got to reduce their morale a little bit. Still, as you can see in the war scores, things remain even. We have moved up to first place with our antics, with now like 3.5 enemy troops killed, 3.5 million I should say. I did participate now in one of the many billions of battles for Newfoundland using my super soldiers. However, they did prove to be disappointing. I thought, from what people were saying on the internet, that this division strategy would allow me to just power through. Unfortunately, even against only small groups of enemies, we're being debuffed by having no supplies as usual. The enemy are probably fortified. Plus, this is the Road to 56 mod, in which infantry regiments can have technologies added to them that give them anti-tank capabilities. So it's possible that just having my 1 tank battalion doesn't allow me to become bulletproof like it does in the base game, or something. Plus, sometimes the enemy actually have anti-tank guns, which I guess shoot through your armoured infantry as well. Something, something, something. We do advance, but then we start losing the battles to hold the territory we took. Then a nuke goes off nearby, not killing me, but killing a bunch of my allies. And with that I thought, forget it, I'll send the super soldiers home. I am still going ahead though with the creation of our 100 comrades divisions, where it's the same idea but with no special forces, so just tons of infantry, a load of artillery, and a small number of tanks to try and give them that little edge. Whether it does give them an edge, highly debatable at this stage, but I'm just trying it anyway because the internet told me to do it. At the same time, we're actually doing a bit of an invasion here, because the Cometerne finally managed to capture a pocket with a port in it that means more troops can be landed and the invasion is less pointless. So I'm coming in here with 18 divisions of mechanized infantry to just shore up this blob. There's not that much enemy stuff here, and indeed as we arrive we're easily able to win a bunch of defensive battles at Houston, and that's the place we need to hold to maintain this pocket, so that's all good. But now we're cutting to, well, a while later. What I wanted to do was push to the east, find more ports to capture and stuff, but as I did that, the enemy came in with like 10 to 20 extra divisions from the west and immediately took all of the places held by my allies. So my push plan didn't work. I should have stayed behind and just played defensively, but of course there were no supplies for that, so I thought I'll try and quickly go and capture somewhere else. That failed, and we ended up in a desperate struggle because now we're stuck. We're vulnerable to complete deletion here unless we can get back into Houston. We're suffering though because we have no supplies, so we can barely move, and in this game there's no being in between two locations, meaning that even if we make the several day journey to Houston, if we then lose a battle while we're there, we effectively get teleported back, and that's what happened just there in between those two moments. We got sent all the way back to our start point in an instant, so this sort of teleportation mechanic doesn't really make a big difference normally, but when you're moving very slowly due to lack of fuel, it's devastating because now we have to spend another week walking to Houston from our old location, and in that time the enemy will put something else in front of us and then we have to win another battle to keep going, and it just cycles on and on. It really looked like we weren't going to escape here until I decided to get serious about this. I decided we are going to save these divisions, and to do that we're going to nuke absolutely everything. So I started just nuking not only the territory I'm trying to move into, but other ones nearby, so that armies coming in to support that will no doubt be in Houston during the time it takes me to get there will also be weakened, making it easier for us to theoretically get in. Although it doesn't make it that much easier because the enemy have so many divisions that I can't see. They can constantly cycle in strong divisions from other directions. I was able to maintain air superiority though, so this just turned into an absolute nuke fest. I just constantly nuked Houston and occasionally nuked the places around it to defeat supporting troops. And I'm not going to go through just how many times I did this. I guess if you check the numbers of nukes I had before this attack, and you check the number I have now in this following clip, you'll get some idea of how many times we nuked this very small area to try and get out. But eventually, with enough nuking, I was able to move my stack over to the next region where we'll have the port. It was a close thing though, because just as I arrived, there's like two guys showing up, this division with no strength, so it's either lots of people with no guns or not very many people. We do manage to somehow defeat them with our exhausted troops, and we move into Houston, and from there we'll just be able to leave, which is my priority. We're not going to actually contend the pocket because it had been proven that it's essentially not going to work. The USA can be in supply with like 30 divisions and we can't get anywhere near that, so we just can't contest unless we capture multiple ports all at the same time or something, which is of course something we'll be keeping in mind for our own anti-USA plans. For now though, we get away. I think one division got left behind due to being defeated in battle, but I eventually got them out as well. So that story ends there, and we go back to besieging the USA as a continent. Things are a bit better than they were at the start of this part. Our side in the war controls a bit more territory, and we now have an absolutely massive army, mostly just sitting around in Europe because we can't do anything with it. However, having a massive army is the precursor condition to us leading a massive invasion of multiple places in the USA at once, which I theorized is what it will take to end this war. Therefore, that's what we're going to be moving towards in the next part.